Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of The Damage Report. I am John Idarola. We are going to be discussing the news as it exists today. I wish it was something other than it was, but this is what we've got. Thankfully, one of the things that we've got is an awesome co-host on today's program, the host of Indisputable, Dr. Rashad Richey. How's it going?
It's going okay. Could be better. Obviously, I'm just as angry and hurt as you are about the news of, once again, another mass murder, this time involving children.
Just endless. We've had 30 mass shootings like this year. I saw a chart. I can't attest to its complete accuracy, but it had cited 288 US-based school shootings in history. And I think the second highest was Mexico with 8. But there's nothing that could be done, Dr. Rashad. There's nothing that could be done, clearly. Anyway, we're going to be getting into that. Don't worry, everyone. We've got a couple different angles on this story that I want to make sure that we get to. It's a tragedy. It should be consuming our nation. The case could be made that we had more than enough violence 2 days ago that it should have been dominating the conversation. So we will be talking about that. But aside from that, there's a little bit coming out of yesterday's primaries I want to talk about. One now candidate, Herschel Walker, who won a primary, is making news. We're going to dive into that. We've got a little bit of good news coming out of the Biden administration when it comes to policing. So we're going to see how impressed we are with that. And the GOP is pushing a women's rights bill. We're going to dive into the substance of that and see how excited we should be about the fact that the GOP apparently now thinks women should have some rights. So we're gonna be diving into that and a lot more. So I'm gonna need everyone to prepare yourself, hold on to your butts as we launch into this. And along the way, if you're on a platform that would allow for something like liking this stream, sharing it, perhaps that would be great. And if you wanna send us comments, tweets, super chats, we will respond during our breaks as we go. But with all that said, Rashad, you ready to jump into this?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with this, in fact.
Look, we already have laws against killing people, and this guy apparently didn't care what the law was. Having a gun law that told him not to have a gun, I don't think would have stopped any of this. So I think that's not the right focus. They obviously have a political agenda of limiting guns in the hands of everybody.
Now that is Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, which was, of course, the site of the Uvalde shooting yesterday. Absolutely devastating, historic shooting that took the lives of 19 children and 2 adults. And the guy who is supposed to be the best versed on law, the most constantly thinking about how the law should be formulated to accomplish the goals, to fulfill the responsibilities the government has, says we already have laws against killing, and having a law that told him to not have a gun wouldn't have done anything. First of all, it's not how laws work. The law wouldn't be telling him you shouldn't have a gun. It would be stopping him from having the gun that he has. But the response out of Ken Paxton, of course, is not surprising. The idea that nothing should be done is effectively the only response we get from government after a shooting like this. One side will literally say, let's not do anything. The other side, the Democrats, will give you thoughts and prayers. They'll imply that something should be done, but they never seem to actually accomplish it. And this is the response that we get. Whoa, everybody. I understand that this is utterly horrifying, but let's not actually do anything about it. Let's especially not politicize it. And that was, of course, they immediately leaped on the right onto saying, don't politicize it. You could have seen this shot of former supposed leftist Glenn Greenwald joining Tucker Carlson to talk about how it's already being politicized. It's a tragedy that you would think that maybe laws would have something to do with this sort of thing. And fundamentally, it is indisputable that the law does matter. So in this particular case, the gunman legally purchased 2 AR platform rifles at a local federal firearms licensee. He did that apparently like the day after his 18th birthday, okay? Now, Texas would have you believe that the law, that politics has nothing to do with this, but their politicians have been very active over the past few years when it comes to gun legislation. They made it easier to purchase guns literally in just the past couple of months. New state law that came into force on September the 1st allowed anyone aged over 21 to carry a handgun in most places without a permit or training. I mean, why would you need training? It's only a handgun in a public place. Before the change, you had to pass a background check, take a safety course, and a competency test to get a license. We are way past responsible gun ownership at this point. Notably, that's for handguns. You can buy a rifle at 18 as long as it's not prohibited. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that like socially you can buy a rifle at 18 or culturally you can buy it. Legally, you can buy a rifle at 18. Politicians sat down and decided that's the age you should be able to buy a gun. You should be able to buy a military grade rifle and just have it for 3 full years before we think you should be able to legally drink amaretto. That's a decision that politicians made. They passed laws to make that what is true legally in Texas. But everybody, we need to pump the brakes. Don't politicize this thing. Let's not talk about the law or anything like that. Rashad, of course, we've heard this a million times before. We have to fight back against it, knowing full well that no matter what we say, no matter what we try to do, it is unlikely that anyone in a position of power will actually do anything to change this.
Not the current leadership, and let's be very clear about politicization. You must politicize this moment. Let me tell you why you got to politicize it. Number one, the definition of political means to be concerned with the affairs of your community, your government, or your country. That's what the definition of political means. If you are concerned about the affairs of your government, of your country, that means you are in fact political. Let's also talk about the Constitution, because a lot of the protectionists of this ridiculous ideology will cite the US Constitution and say you can't start talking about taking guns away because the Constitution gives you this right, this ability. Here's the reality about the US Constitution. Number one, it's a flawed document. Number two, with every constitutional right comes a legal and statutory responsibility. What is your statutory responsibility? Your statutory responsibility means that you do not eliminate the life and liberty of others because of your exercise of a freedom thereof. For example, we have freedom of speech in this country. Freedom of speech comes with a legal liability. If you decide to utilize that freedom in order to harm other people because of your speech, if you are engaged in putting hits out on people because of your speech, that's illegal. That's a common sense policy restriction based on statutory language. Nobody calls that speech restriction. Nobody calls that speech control. We call that common sense. And when we talk about these gun laws, just like you brought up, brother, it doesn't make sense that you can have a weapon that literally can kill hundreds of individuals when you're 18, but you cannot have a drink of alcohol until you're 21. Here's the policy disconnect. The reason why they say you can't drink alcohol until you're 21 is because of the potential danger it may pose to you and others at an earlier age. You can operate a vehicle and you can crash. You can do something wild while you are underage and drinking, and it could lead to harm. Well, same logic with weapons, same logic with rifles, same logic with these guns and gun culture. Until we attack it on that front, John, we're going to continue to have this back and forth with feckless leaders that don't give a damn about progress.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Leaders who will lie about what the Constitution actually says when it comes to guns. And even if it didn't, let's say that the Second Amendment was the bizarre fever dream version of itself that people who value guns 100 times more than they value every collected life in America think it is. I think it might have been Hank Thompson. I think that I saw a tweet from him yesterday, and it really struck me. He said, the Constitution was written with a feather on animal skin. Yeah.
Yep.
People are dying now. Like that thing that utterly ignorant racists wrote hundreds of years ago. Yeah, you worship that more than people's lives. That's a good idea. Anyway, I want to get into a bit more of who has actually been political when it comes to guns, and in fact, the shooting that we just saw. So Governor Abbott, who of course was an enthusiastic supporter of all those different laws that we just talked about that got changed, he said that doing the permitless carry law was the biggest and best gun law of last year. It instilled freedom in Texas, freedom to wield a gun without literally any training or looking into your past. That's a kind of freedom, I suppose. They also made it so in foster homes, you can now store guns and ammunition together rather than separately. Apparently, being able to have it, but store them separately, that was too much of an infringement on your freedom. Now you can put it together. It makes it a lot easier for the foster kids to accidentally shoot themselves or the people they're in the house with. Gun owners can visibly display their weapons while in a motor vehicle. All the better to terrorize people, of course. Junior marshals can carry concealed guns instead of storing them in schools and colleges. He also signed the Second Amendment Sanctuary Act, which forbids local agencies from enforcing new federal gun laws because, again, they worship guns above all else. But that's just the law, and that's before this actual shooting. At the same time that they were saying, don't you dare politicize this by, addressing the crisis, they were jumping into politicizing it in their own way. Paul Gosar, who has finally, as of like an hour ago, taken down this tweet. He's a politician, technically. Most of his time is spent on places like 4chan and other conspiracy theory websites. He immediately began trying to identify the shooter as a member of the trans community, a leftist, also an illegal alien, also God only knows what else. Mad libs for crazy people. There was no evidence of that. They began spreading photos of literally other people, but they jumped on that. They were super excited when they thought that it might have been a trans person that did this. We don't have this tweet, but Candace Owens too tweeted, what drives an 18-year-old to murder innocent children? I don't know. But judging by the photos of him cross-dressing, we can assume there were plenty of signs that he was mentally disturbed and abused by adults in his life. So this is the grooming thing. So having access to the guns, that's not the problem. It was that other adults had been preying on this, but none of this is true. None of this is based on literally anything. And all of this goes against their pledge to never politicize a shooting like this. They'll politicize it, Rashad, but only with disinformation and nonsense, not with anything that might stop the killing.
Yeah, and the reality is you don't have to go too far back in the past of this country to realize that when we had our assault weapons ban, what decreased? Mass shootings decreased in the United States of America. That is a fact, okay? They're not concerned about children, John. There was a major GOP candidate running for governor. We covered her on Indisputable. On her campaign truck, it literally said, Jesus, guns, and babies. Now, that was the order of priority. Jesus, and I'm sure she was talking about white Jesus, a fictional character, guns, and babies. That is their holy trinity. And they're not talking about babies that are born. They're talking about fetuses because they don't give a damn about the baby that's actually birthed. They want to make this a red meat issue with a woman's right to choose. So let's take their paradigm here. They believe that guns are more important than children. That's based on their own language and the contextualization of their own campaign.
Yeah, it's 100% true. I mean, she's at least being honest. She's being clear about that. Anyway, like the politicizing, I saw in the immediate aftermath, I saw Charlie Kirk, who I know you've debated. He tweeted, "Look how fast they're moving on from white supremacy to gun control." I didn't understand what he meant at first because I hadn't seen anyone claiming that this shooting was the result of white supremacy, and indeed they did not. And apparently that's not what he meant. What he meant was they talked about white supremacy with the shooting in Buffalo, and now they're talking about gun control. Charlie Kirk is ostensibly a political thinker and analyst. He thinks about and then talks about politics, and he doesn't seem to get that people were preoccupied with white supremacy in the shooting where a guy put out a white supremacist manifesto that had clearly, he's trying to make sure that you know that he was motivated by white supremacy. There's no evidence of that in this case. There was no manifesto. There was none of the great replacement theory. There was none of that. And so I guess, Rashad, we should have been consistent. Despite the lack of the manifesto in this particular shooting, we should have still talked about it just to keep Charlie Kirk satisfied instead of talking about the guns that were used to actually kill all of these kids. And you'll notice, by the way, that while we were flippant and we were waving in the wind, white supremacy in one case, gun control in the other, he's moved past all of that. He doesn't give a damn about any of this. They don't even pretend on the right to be horrified by any of this. Ainsley Earhardt, she shed some tears on Fox and Friends this morning. But the others, the Candace Owens, the Charlie Kirks, they don't even feel an obligation to be like, oh, slaughtered children are a bad thing. They immediately move into damage control.
Listen, man, Charlie Kirk is not a thinking man at all. He's a propagandist. This is what he does. He wants to stoke the flames, and he's become very astute at doing so. But look at his proclamation for what it is. Instead of highlighting the truth that the mass shooter who killed Black people in Buffalo had a racist reason for doing so, that's on the record.
Yep.
And we call it out based on the actual evidence available. He wants you to think, well, okay, well, that means every mass shooting should have a white supremacist element. And the first one that does not, that possibly has none, he says, well, there's a disruption in the narrative. Well, it's not. We're just telling the truth. The truth is, if you had a law that said this 18-year-old cannot get this gun, those children would be alive. If you had a ban on the weaponry, these children would be alive. And here's the other thing. The killer actually put out multiple messages on social media, eluding that this was going to happen. Cryptic messages, they call it. Why is it so damn easy in this country for a kid who turns 18 to get that kind of weapon to commit that level of carnage? They're not making this about the children who are dead, the families who have been destroyed. Those lives will never be the same, never.
Yeah.
And when you kill someone, John, you don't just kill them. You kill their lineage, you kill their potential, you kill their children, you kill their children's children. And the death of that young person creates a de facto death in the parents that raised them. They will never be the same. And instead of some of these conservatives actually saying the right thing, which, by the way, used to be a thing, John. They used to actually say the right thing in the first 3 days or so. They're not even doing that anymore. They're letting you know they care nothing about this nation. And once again, the majority of the country stands against them. The majority of the country says something needs to be done. The majority of NRA members, they believe in universal background checks. NRA leadership does not. The majority of America says we need to have gun reform policies and we need to have them now. Guess what? Those that control the gun lobby, they say no. The political elite, they say no. And the Democrats who talk a good game, talk a big game, they say yes, but then they do the exact opposite. That is where we are in this country right now.
Yeah, 100%. It used to be that the NRA would stop tweeting for a couple days.
Yeah.
So everyone was pointing out that in addition to the fact that apparently the last day of school was going to be Thursday, so these kids got so close to being safe for once, not being in an environment where we make them unsafe by the fact that we tolerate so much of this violence. All these right wingers are going to go speak at an NRA conference on Friday. And they haven't all confirmed whether they still will or not, but Trump has. He says, I am still going and speaking at that. So again, we are moving way past even like Biden. He's still he's performing like the ritual where he comes and he gives a speech where he implies that the government should do something. That's the only thing they'll do, but he's doing that. The right has moved past that. They're not even gonna pretend that they care about these kids. Like Rashad, you're so right about like the shattering the family. I almost don't even want to say this thing that I saw, but we do not shield our audience. They had the parents going and giving DNA samples because they couldn't identify the remains of some of the children that had been killed. And DNA was the only way that they would know which murdered kid was which. And they're moving past that. Candace Owens will shed no tears. Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, his defenders on the supposed left, they're moving past that. They're perfectly fine with that. And there's a lot of people watching this right now. There's literally thousands of people across many different communities. It is almost certain that one of you lives in an environment where you will be maybe a few miles away from the next shooting. Nothing that's done now, and nothing will be done, but nothing that's done now will stop the one that just happened. But we are guaranteeing with the inaction that we are going to be witnessing today, tomorrow, throughout until finally, maybe Friday, we've moved on and no one is talking about this anymore. We are guaranteeing that this is going to happen. This is like a record-breaking massacre, but it won't be for long because there's people out there that see this, sick people that think I can do better, and no one is gonna stop them from getting the weapons necessary to do it. Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump, all of them, they want mass shooters to be as well armed as possible, and that is indisputable.
Man, when are we going to get tired of routine? Routine responses, routine leadership, routine performative dynamics. Here's what Biden is going to do because it's already in the playbook. Console the nation, visit the family, hold a press conference where the shooting happened. Say it won't happen again. Blame it on the opposition party and business as usual.
Yeah.
Biden is going to do it. President Obama did it. Donald Trump did it. Never president before. Now, at some point, you have to start pushing the envelope. I'm talking to the leadership class, in particular the White House. Executive orders are a powerful tool. They're so powerful that we really have not truly identified and categorized how powerful they can be. Push the damn envelope. Write the executive orders until the Supreme Court says it's against the law. Show them that you're willing to do the unthinkable here, President Biden. Maybe you get some traction. And even if the court eventually overturns you, the people that care about the policy will not. They will reward you for trying. But damn it, you're not even trying.
Yeah, no, we can't get them to cancel a tiny fraction of student loan debt, like a less controversial thing than something like this. And some centrists will say what you already jumped out in front of, like, well, no, they'll just reverse it later. Make them. That's right. Make them reverse.
Put them on the defensive. Finally.
Exactly. Make them do the incredibly unpopular thing. Show that you will actually fight. People do not regularly get fired up to vote to keep in power people who simply preemptively surrender on any tough question. Yeah. Anyway, we have a lot of thoughts about this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a break. We're gonna come back to where we were at. There's more that we have to say about this, but stick around. We'll be back after this. Okay, everybody, I think not surprising. We have more to say about this. Let's start off with this video.
And it should not be an occupational hazard of an elementary school student to go to school and for this to happen to them. And I really hope people don't speculate, don't jump to the usual political conclusions, don't call for these sweeping massive changes while people are grieving. And it sounds to me like may not even have been reunited with their children yet.
Okay, so don't everybody jump to conclusions. Don't try to do anything legally to change this. That's what Kellyanne Conway was saying. Now, oddly enough, while the Republicans won't allow literally anything to be done in regards to guns, it doesn't matter if 90% of the country agrees on background checks, 99%, 120%. It wouldn't matter, literally nothing. And background checks are, by the way, the smallest, most shallow, it's like pudding soft regulations. They won't even allow that. But they do have ideas. There are things that the right wants to do, and I want to run through some of these insane things that they're proposing. So we're gonna start off with Ted Cruz. Take a look at this.
We know from past experience that the most effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus. You know, inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work.
Okay, so Ted Cruz is an idiot, a weenie, a liar, and all of that's on display in this particular case. He says don't politicize it. He immediately did, saying we should have more armed guards in the schools. Oops, they did. In this particular case, the thing that he thinks would have solved this problem literally did not. As was confirmed by a member of the Texas Department of Public Safety, the shooter crashed his car near the school, got out with a gun and wearing body armor. Literally none of that does Ted Cruz want to change. He wants them to have access to guns and body armor. Law enforcement engaged him. He made his way into school anyway and went classroom to classroom shooting. They have armed guards. They do. They have a massive budget in that area. They also, by the way, have a congressman who enthusiastically crows about how he stopped any gun control legislation from being passed. So there's an idea, Rashad, that you're always gonna hear. The guns in schools aren't a problem. It's just that you need more guns. When someone starts shooting, everyone else should start shooting too. Of course, in this case, it didn't help. That's not gonna stop Ted Cruz from proposing it next time.
Yeah, and this is how insane it is, man. Literally, politicians are elected to solve policy problems. When there's a problem like this, which is really the most extreme problem you will have, a person killing a bunch of children at one time. That's a real policy problem in a country. When the killer obtained the gun legally, just turned 18, had a history of posting things that were cryptic and seemed as if they were threatening to a group of children, still able to get a gun, right? Still able to get this weaponry. The people who are in charge of solving that issue by way of policy, those on the right are saying, well, let's not talk about the politicians who are elected to solve this problem. Well, what in the hell are we supposed to talk about? What are we supposed to do? Joe Biden comes out yesterday and tells people to pray together. I didn't elect you to be my pastor, Joe. I elected you to be my president. So now I need a presidential policy related response to this. That's what we elected you to do, not to sing Kumbaya or just to give us words of encouragement. There are inspirational speakers that can do that. You, sir, are president of the United States of America. You got to start acting like it.
Exactly. Yeah, I would add, I want Ted Cruz to start acting like he's a senator from that state. I want him to at least pretend that he cares more about stopping more of these Texas massacres than he does stopping like Ruger's stock price from dropping slightly. It is clear where his loyalties lie.
Like he wants to stop critical race theory from being taught in K through 12 education, something that's not even taught in K through 12. Mm-hmm. If they had that vigor for something that's actually a problem like this, then problem solved.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, they've spent literally months talking constantly about protecting our kids from what? The Handmaid's Tale, a book about being gay. Those are the true threats, of course. That's not the only idea though, the armed guards. One guest was brought into Fox News in the immediate aftermath of the shooting to say that we need man traps and tripwires. I'm not gonna play this video because I don't hate the audience, but I will read a little bit of what this, I'm not gonna swear, what this person had to say. Man traps, a series of interlocking doors at the school entrance that are triggered by a tripwire. The tripwire can be a gunshot, broken glass, a manual switch tossed by the school employees, and it traps the shooter like a rat. And when he's trapped like a rat, we're buying time. The most precious commodity these children can ever get is time to run, time to hide, time to get away from this madman and his bullets. Not his guns, notice, they don't say the guns, just the bullets. It's tripwires, it's man traps, it's not labor, it's not gun control. Well, why not? Why don't we have really tall walls with parapets at the top and maybe like a drawbridge that comes down and a moat? You can stock it with gators, Rashad. You can do all of these things, not stop the person from getting access to the most capable, like the weapons most capable of gunning down massive amounts of civilians possible. So that guy wants this guy to be trapped like a rat. He also wants him to have an AR, and he wants him to have like armor penetrating bullets, and he wants him to have body armor of his own. He wants him to have large capacity magazines. He wants to briefly delay the shooter, but once he's past the delay, he wants him to be equipped like a T-1000. He wants him to be Rambo after he gets past the tripwires and the booby traps and all of that.
Let me say this, man. This is a damn shame. Literally, your solution takes more energy, more might, more willpower than the simple solution of reform. So you want to create a solution that literally is impossible. And let me explain why it's impossible. I can't even believe I'm entertaining this ridiculous ass statement, but I do want to speak to it in a legitimate way. Liability. If you create booby traps inside of school systems, insurance companies will not insure that school. There will be no insurance policy. Here's why. Because the courts have ruled that if you have booby traps on your property, commercial or residential, and somebody is trespassing, even if they're trespassing illegally or if they're trespassing by accident, which is possible, if that booby trap activates, then you are 100% responsible for what happens to that individual. So no insurance company would ever insure a facility that has booby traps inside of it, period. So it's a ridiculous solution, but it shows you how extreme they're willing to go in order to spin a narrative that does not include guns, right? Even as you highlighted, they refuse to say guns in the actual statement about guns. They want to say bullets rather than guns. That is intentional. That's by design. That's not a mistake.
100%. Yeah. That guy was on Sean Hannity, by the way. Sean Hannity, I'm gonna guess, what was he being watched by 1-2 million people during that segment? In the immediate aftermath of a devastating mass shooting, he decides to give time to a guy whose political advice is based on the fact that before his news hit, he was watching Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade or Home Alone. Yep. That's the solution. We're gonna quickly run through a few of the other things that they brought up. Sean Hannity says we need to give tax breaks for police officers to patrol schools. Police officers are already there. By the way, if you're a police officer or a member of the military and you see that and think, oh, Sean Hannity wants me to get a tax break to do this, bear in mind, Sean Hannity also wants you to face people who have bullets capable of penetrating your body armor. He wants you to have a very good chance of being killed during that shooting. They also blamed an anti-police narrative for mass shootings. It's just that you guys are mean to cops. That's what manifests mass shooters and the weapons they need to gun people down. Senator Ron Johnson blamed the secularization of society and a loss of faith. I think the solution is renewed faith. Nothing to do with guns. By the way, like going more and more abstract, that's where they feel comfortable in this area. Lauren Boebert tweeted, "You cannot legislate away evil." Which I respond, oh good, I'm not trying to. I want to get rid of the guns, not the metaphysical construct.
Right.
AOC responded by saying, why even be in Congress if you don't believe in doing your job? Just quit and let someone who actually gives a damn do it instead of acting like a useless piece of furniture when babies are shot with AR-15s that we let teen boys impulse buy before they can legally have a beer. And if you think, well, okay, you're picking on Lauren Boebert, obviously nobody else would be so stupid as to focus on evil. No, they are. Tommy Lauren tweeted, it's not about guns, it's about evil. The Democrats only want it to be about guns so they don't have to address the evil. What I've noticed, Rashad, maybe you've noticed this too, is that the mass shooters don't generally arm themselves with evil for these shootings. They usually go for the guns, actually.
Yeah, and see, they would not apply that linear logic to anything else other than when people use guns to commit mass shootings. They won't say about individuals who commit other crimes. They won't say, well, we don't have a crime issue, we have an evil issue. When it comes to them increasing sentences for those who are convicted of nonviolent drug offenses, they don't say, well, it's not the issue of drugs, it's the issue of evil. They don't do that. Yeah. They create policies and they want these policies to be implemented in a way that would deter individuals or punish individuals who are committing nonviolent drug offenses. Now, obviously, I disagree with their methodology. I think prevention and rehabilitation is key. But the point is, they don't have that kind of jargon for anything other than mass shootings, which means they are hypocritical in their own proposed linear logic about what this is supposed to solve. Dr. King came up against this during his time when those on the right and left said to Dr. King that you cannot legislate morality. But he said in response, but you can't make it illegal for them to lynch a black man. And he said, I'll take that, okay?
100%, yeah, you're totally right. Okay, we are gonna take our second break. We come back, we are gonna be switching up gears, talking about something coming out of the election. So with that, we'll be back in just a few. Okay, there's gonna be a little bit of a thematic linkage to what we were talking about earlier, but we've got a guy who might be the next senator from Georgia, so let's jump into this video.
Hey, Bonner Roger with CNN. I know. Guys, do you support any new gun laws in the wake of this Texas shooting?
Do what now?
Do you support new gun laws in the wake of this Texas shooting?
What I like to do is see it
and everything and stuff. I like to see it and everything.
A favorite New Jersey trip?
Thank you.
That's Herschel Walker. He won his primary. It wasn't close. He got 70% of the vote as of this morning, and he did so without debating his opponents and not, answering any of the many questions people have about his fitness to be a senator. And that video only seemed to confirm it. What he wants to do is see it and something or whatever, and then he walks away from Raju right there. Everybody is wondering what he would do as a senator to protect the children of Georgia, and his response is he wants to see it and something. Rashad, that did not make me feel better.
He's a dumbass, and what he's really saying is he wants to be told what to say, and because no one has told him what to say, he has no comment, he has no opinion, nobody has guided him on the talking point. Now, yes, he has low intellectual capacity. I feel completely comfortable saying that because I met the guy. Number two, there's a reason he slaughtered the field in the Republican primary for US Senate in Georgia last night. And it's not just because Trump endorses him. Remember, the other Trump endorsed candidate in Georgia lost by a massive amount. Purdue lost by a massive amount yesterday. He was Trump endorsed as well. Vernon Jones was Trump endorsed also. So why did Herschel Walker win his election when other Trump endorsed candidates lost in Georgia and other southern states? It's because Herschel Walker is the most controllable person in the GOP fighting for an opportunity to become their surrogate. Mm-hmm. He has zero backbone. He lacks integrity. Even in his own book, he admitted that he has had issues with his own integrity. Now, according to him, Jesus has delivered him from all of his lies. But just recently, John, the man was out for lying about even graduating from college. He said he graduated top of his class. He took away glory from somebody because somebody actually did graduate that year and graduated top of their class. And guess what? He's so beloved from that college community. Nobody called him out on it until we started to research. Wait a minute. He's not in a yearbook. We can't find his degree. It took years before anyone ever called him out on it. So now he's been called out on the lies about his businesses, about his education. And remember, who lies about their education when they are one of the most respected sportsmen in the United States and really in the world? I mean, Herschel Walker is legendary in the sports arena. Why lie about your academics? Why lie about your education? Because he wants to fit in somewhere, brother. He wants to desperately fit in to a culture that he probably thinks if he can connect to this culture of white elitism, of white academics, of the political class of the GOP and their elitism, if he could connect and he can become one of them, then he has arrived. He's the most dangerous person to ever put in political office because he's not there for people. He's there to validate himself, and he will do whatever they tell him to do in order to keep that validation going.
100%. Yeah. And along the way, the lie that you identified, that's the same exact lie that Trump told.
That's right.
He lied that he was first in his class. He's just following the pattern there. He may not even know that he's doing it. He may not know literally anything that he's doing, but that is the pattern that he's following. By the way, like all the concerns on Fox News and on the right about Joe Biden and his mental fitness, any of them expressing concern about Herschel Walker? No. Now, the Democrats supposedly are gonna fight back. So we're gonna jump into this second video. One of the first new blows against them, an ad against Herschel Walker. Let's take a look at this.
Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, the candidate, is drumming up controversy.
A big name Senate candidate doing damage control. Walker violated the law by spending money as a political candidate before declaring his candidacy.
Records showed Mr. Walker's own company benefited from PPP loans despite ridiculing businesses that took the payout.
A scheduled campaign event for former NFL star canceled today following backlash from this, a swastika made up of vaccine syringes.
Science said man came from apes. If that is true, why are there still apes? Do you know right now I have something? It will kill any cobra on your body. EPA, FDA approved.
I also was valedictorian in my class. I also was in the top 1% of my graduating class in college. Whether it's in the locker room, the boardroom, or even the bedroom, I only trust Novogen. You're not sure what he's going to say. You know, after 20 minutes, you're not sure what he's going to come up with.
So that is a web ad released by the Democratic Party of Georgia targeting Herschel Walker and mentioning a lot of the controversy around him. Not all of them. They didn't mention the allegations of domestic abuse, but they hit on a lot of different things there. I'm curious, Rashad, do you think, they say that now they are going to hit him with everything. They're going to put a ton of money into it. They're going to hit him hard. My belief is that his strategy will mostly be to not talk about himself, to not talk at all, to not appear in public. Do you think that this effort is going to be successful? You see in that ad, do you think that that is going to be enough to take Raphael Warnock across the line?
No. And I say this in all due respect to the Democratic Party leadership. I know many of them. I used to be the director and chief strategist of the Georgia Democratic Party. I would have done this completely differently. All of the elements that they are showing now in their ad, in all due respect, once again, all of them have already been done. He still won with 70% of the Republican vote. He beat an individual who was already statewide elected as the agricultural commissioner. The vote turnout for the Republican Party was almost triple that of the turnout for the Democratic primary, which means there's an excitement in their base in order to show up and vote. If you do not figure out a way to suppress their thought about Herschel Walker has already proven all of those negatives that were already in the headlines about him, all of those negatives that were already against him, he is able to still overcome them with the base that he has. And I know we like to say that Georgia is a blue state. It is not. Make no mistake about it. Georgia is not a blue state. If you keep thinking Georgia is a blue state, you're gonna run into some problems and start scratching your head after election day in the general. Georgia has a Democratic US Senator 1 and 2, all right? You got Ossoff, you got Warnock. Georgia has a Republican governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, a Republican Secretary of State, a Republican Department of Labor commissioner, a Republican legislature, Republican House, Republican Senate. Everything else is Republican. The majority of the counties are Republican, majority of the sheriffs are Republican, majority of the members of commission are Republican. The list goes on and on and on. It is not a Democratic state. So while you're running ads that would absolutely shock and appall us, the man just won with hundreds of thousands of votes in his primary, and the vote total, once again, tripled that of the performance of the Democratic side. You have to now start suppressing his votes on the conservative side in order to make this thing land.
Yeah, I hope that they've got something. I don't think we have time to play the ad, but they have an ad that they're running against Warnock that says that he's in favor of higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, a bunch of nonsense. It's not true, but it'll probably be more effective than reiterating to people that Herschel Walker isn't mentally competent. They already know that. They didn't find that to be an issue.
They didn't care.
In supporting him. They didn't care. They didn't care. They love Trump. This is not the sort of thing that's going to bother them. Anyway, with that said, we are running a little bit low on time. I want to make sure that we get to as many of these stories as possible. So why don't we jump into our C block and we'll close out the first hour with that. On the heels of yesterday's update that the DOJ would be revising their use of force policy, we've got some more potential good news coming out of the Biden administration. Apparently, he's going to be directing federal law enforcement agencies to revise their own use of force policies and to restrict particular tactics, including chokeholds and no-knock warrants, while using grant incentives to encourage state and local agencies to adopt the same standards that we talked about in the show yesterday about the fact that the DOJ can say whatever they want. They can't force state and local police departments to change their approach to lethal force, but you can use these sorts of incentives to potentially try to get through to them. Seems like it's going to be difficult. In any event, we've got the Biden administration also saying they're going to create a national registry of officers that have been fired for misconduct and restrict the transfer of most military equipment to police. That is apparently they're bringing back a policy that had existed under the Obama administration back in 2015. We also have the administration, they're gonna give guidance on screening inherent bias among the rank and file, including those potentially harboring white supremacist views. So I expect that particular change will make up about 45 minutes of Tucker Carlson's monologue tonight. But anyway, we have several different changes here, actually taking seriously extremism amongst law enforcement, the militarization via equipment of law enforcement, the ability to fire someone for misconduct and then they get hired in another police department just down the street. There's a lot of different changes here. I'm interested in your opinion, Rashad. What do you think about what Biden's doing here?
It's a move in the right direction, but not strong enough. And let me explain that. Number one, the Department of Justice, in particular through the Department of Civil Rights, they can pretty much investigate anybody they choose to, okay? So they can put officers under investigation. You would have to beef up that department, allocate more money to their agents and their staff, but you can do that. That's one deterrent. But here's the other thing. You can control police behavior. The way you do it is you defund them. You defund them as the federal government. You defund police agencies that act in these egregious manners. That will start a process, but they're unwilling to do it because it's unpopular. And then here's the other thing. The executive order basically from the president that will be signed today according to the narrative, this really impacts federal police. So this is not some sweeping executive mandate that will have a massive connection to those who are living everyday lives. You know, John, when I go out and I'm driving my car or I'm walking down the street, I'm not concerned about the FBI jumping out on me. That's not my concern.
That's true. That's
all right.
True.
So I get it, but it doesn't do enough. It's performative on many levels. This is not where the actual target concern is.
Well, I think you're right. Despite that, some cops already reaching out to places like the New York Post. One cop in New York said it's beyond a slap in the face. It just goes to show you how far left Biden's gone now. Law enforcement is a tough job and they're making it 1,000 times harder. This job is hard as hell. It's even harder with everyone recording. Now you'll say if I'm fighting with somebody and put a little pressure on his back, he could die and I'm going to jail. Let him go. Why would I want to arrest him? Well, first of all, you're literally saying that the thing that you're doing is likely to kill someone. Your job is harder to do when people are recording you. Why would that be the case? What are you doing that makes it more difficult when people can see what it is that you did? But the idea that, Rashad, the idea that the job is 1,000 times harder if they can't use chokeholds, if they can't do no-knock warrants, that doesn't make it 10% harder, 50%. It's 1,000 times harder to have literally any reform, no matter how small, no matter how narrowly tailored, no matter how, as you point out, unlikely to actually affect any of these cops, because it's only going to affect federal officials. They immediately run to the right wing to start crying about how the job has become 1,000 times harder.
Yeah, and here's the thing, being a cop is not the most dangerous profession in America. You know what the most dangerous profession is? Cutting trees. Per capita, based on injury and death, cutting trees is more dangerous than any other profession. You know what else is more dangerous than being a cop? Driving a taxi, working at a convenience store. These are dangerous jobs too. Do you see us changing laws for them in order to accommodate the fact that it is a dangerous job? No, we do not change the laws for them. If a tree cutter cuts a tree and it falls on a house and kills somebody, they're going to jail. We do not accommodate them because it is an unsafe job. Just like we should not simply accommodate cops because the job itself can be dangerous at times.
100%, I agree. Well, that is unfortunately all the time we have for our first hour. I want to thank everyone watching on the podcast or on one of our linear platforms. But if you're on Twitch or YouTube, the members app, a number of other places, we've got a lot more to talk about where that came from. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few. Okay, the Dark Phoenix became a tier 1 member over on YouTube. Much appreciated. Thank you for being with us. Jonathan Toten has been a tier 2 member for 14 months. Says, last I saw, the area of Uvalde is in need of blood for the wounded. So if any dragons in the area and can donate, please consider doing so. Stay awesome and safe, Dragon Squad. That is a great idea. Thank you for reminding everyone. The Dark Phoenix says, the fact that these kids were the same age as my younger brother is truly depressing. We're in desperate need of change. How long before the next one? I don't know. I don't know what our hope is supposed to be in the midterms or in the presidential election. I don't know what we're supposed to hope for at this point. A miracle, I guess. Jenna Midwest, member on Twitch for 16 months, says, thanks TYT and all the folks that make it happen each day. I don't know what I would do without the honesty here. Love you guys. Thank you. We do appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.